Thank you. That was a great talk. Um, by the way, Wei Sung did go on to China, and he became very famous in China and in Korea as a Huayan Sutra master. And anyway, yeah. So, are there any questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
So, like during it's about a practice question.
Mhm.
So during the interview, um, a lot of times I don't ask questions because, as I said, I start to think, and then my brain really starts to think. So then when it comes to the Kangon practice, then I'm thinking. I'm it's not easy for me to make that break between thinking that's required for the question and
Mhm.
then the mindset required for the Kangan practice, right?
Mhm.
Yet, as proved by the retreat yesterday, in my experience, if I don't ask the question, if I don't really look at my practice and what I'm doing, the pushing and the pulling and the pushing, mostly pushing, by the way, then um, then I don't resolve that necessarily. And maybe eventually, if I happen to have an experience at a retreat like yesterday. So how do we? What's your recommendation for the interview process of being able to switch? And I understand that the hit may do that, but obviously for me that's not enough. So what advice would you give on that balance between perhaps the thinking that's required for you to really look at your practice and really take a hard look at it and be honest with yourself about what's going on versus the mindset needed for the Kangon practice? Or are they the same and I'm missing something? I just thought of that just now. So that's my question.
Well, you just answered it. So, yeah, they don't have to be separate. So, when our energy goes up here, then we're, just like Todd said, then we're trapped by our conceptions. We're trapped by our ideas. But when our energy goes here, then thinking is no problem. Then we can use our thinking. So I had one of the great Zen masters of the 20th century as my teacher. And I would never ask him a question because I would think, oh, this is such a stupid question that I have. I'm sure he'll answer it and I'd make up an answer. And then he died. So where did that get me? So yeah, if you have a question, answer it. And don't worry about, what kind of mind you're using and whatever. If you have a question, just ask it. Just like you just asked a question and see how it unfolds. And don't worry about questions resolving. If a question truly resolves, then it's been killed and it's not alive anymore. So keep your questions alive in the moment. Always do that. So if you have a question about, practice, say, I don't know, how should I do practice? And if a teacher says, well, you try this, try this, whatever the teacher says, when you're practicing, look at your own practice. Don't think of the teacher's words. Maybe they're pointing you in a certain direction, but look at your own practice in that moment and keep it alive. Always keep this. What is this? What is this that is happening? People ask questions about relationships and they ask questions about their job. How do you relate to your job? And people have many, many questions, and these are real questions. They're sincere, important questions. And I wish I'd asked those questions. But they don't never have if you hold an answer as that's it, and you don't keep inspecting the thing that made you ask that question, then you just killed something. Okay? And I know you don't do that. I know that you do look at it and you say, you don't shut it down. So don't ever shut anything down. This is like to everybody. Don't ever shut anything down. So thank you for your question. Are there any other questions?
I have a question, Judy.
Sure.
It's about something that I thought of last week, actually, after
Huh?
Pink's talk, and maybe Todd's talk answered it partially, but in terms of negative thoughts that come up with in practice, and then I sort of think there's two ways I deal with it. It's like, oh well, I'm just sitting here exposed, like I have no protection because I'm not doing anything else except sitting there. And the other way I think of it is, well, maybe it just passes by and it doesn't really matter too much. So I just want to know your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Those are exactly the same. Yeah, when we sit, we're really exposed. There's nothing to distract us. When my mother was very opposed to my doing meditation because it was Buddhism, right? But then she eventually accepted it because she noticed I was much nicer to her, and so she finally decided to ask me to teach her how to meditate. And she had a lot of physical problems. There was no way she could sit on the floor, so I sat her in this real comfortable armchair in her living room, and I wasn't going to teach her anything about a mudra because there's no way she could do that. But I told her to put her arms on, her arms supported by the arms of the chair. And then before I said anything else, she looked at me very brightly and she said, "Can I read while I'm doing this?" you know? So, yeah, we can't read while we're doing it. We can't scroll our phones. We can't, listen to a podcast. I mean, we can't run or jog or take photographs or play the piano or whatever. We can't dance. Those we're sitting. When we're doing sitting meditation, that's what we're doing, and we're completely exposed. Exactly right. And then these thoughts appear, and yeah, they were ephemeral. In classical Buddhism, there's 6 sense organs. There's the eyes, the nose, the tongue, the body, which means the skin, and I guess also maybe proprioception. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And you say, what? Mind is a sense organ? Yeah, the mind perceives thoughts. So these thoughts arise, and they're perceived, and then you don't have to hold on to them. So on the one hand, we're completely exposed. And on the other hand, as Todd says, that allows us a space to see that, yeah, these thoughts are ephemeral. What are they made of? What is their substance? And when I mean that, I don't mean like theoretical, like this is about when, I was held over a toilet at the age of 2 by my elder brother. I mean, what is their substance? Like this watch has a plastic watch band, right? My blouse is made of cotton. My body is made of all kinds of different cells, and I think the majority of the cells are actually bacteria and viruses, if I remember correctly. So yeah. So what is the substance of our thinking? And that substance isn't there. It's completely insubstantial. So we're completely exposed, and that means that we can see. Oh, look at that. Look at that. Look at that. And not hold anything. So the problem isn't thinking, the problem is holding to this thinking. That's the problem. That's what awakened the 6th ancestor, Huineng, when he was selling firewood in the market, and he heard someone reciting from the Diamond Sutra, "Do not hold onto your thinking." And then he woke up. So thank you for your question. Yeah, they're not separate. And yeah, saying that we're completely exposed is a great way to say it. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. So, are there any other questions?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay. I
Along
think
this,
Jane, wait, I think Jane had a question earlier. Is that
okay.
right? Jane, did you have a question earlier?
Well, I do, but there's not a lot enough time for all the questions. So,
Well, I'll give you a quick answer and I'll give Charlie a quick answer.
okay. Um, Maybe there isn't one, but uh, it seems like sometimes the answers, uh, when we talk about, if a person is hungry, you give them food.
Yeah.
Person is thirsty, you give them drink.
Hmm.
And I feel like in my life is not that simplistic.
Hmm.
And so how do you answer that? When somebody comes to you with and needs money because they've spent all theirs and they are gonna if it's not as simple as I just see a hungry person, I'll give them food. That's simple, but my life seems not to be that simple.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are many more hungry people than you can possibly feed. So, yeah. So these answers point to a direction. They point to a direction. And as Todd said, do you dismiss the person in your mind or do you see them as human? Are you in a position to help or are you not in a position to help? So, yeah, you can't feed all the hungry people in this world alone, but you can find ways. As things appear, sometimes you can find a way, sometimes you cannot find a way. If it's really important to you, you will find a way to get together with other people. But it's about your direction. When you see this person, do you see their humanity or do you dismiss them? That's the point. Do you see their need or do you just dismiss them? So that's my short answer to that question. You're right. It is definitely simplistic, absolutely simplistic, but it's pointing to a direction. So, Charlie.
Yes, going back to your earlier line of conversation, when I have a question about technique in sitting, it's
Mm-hmm.
like when we are sitting and we're completely exposed like that, and we're letting thoughts just flow out, and it's easy enough to do when we're not attached to those particular ideas, but suddenly something comes into the mind that
Mm-hmm.
is really unpleasant, uncomfortable, or whatever kind of thing that you're willing to let go of, but it doesn't want to leave. It just kind of stays there. It's stuck. We're stuck with it too. What do you do when you're stuck with that real uncomfortable feeling and you're sitting?
No one ever asks about being stuck with a comfortable, good feeling. But it's the same problem, you know? If you're sitting there thinking, oh, my life is so wonderful, it's such a beautiful day, later I'm going, so nobody minds the bad thoughts. I mean, the good thoughts, and everybody doesn't like the bad thoughts, but holding on to anything is a problem. And the thing to do is look at it and say, what are you? What are you made of? What is this? Look not at the surface, look at the substance. Look deeply at it. Just what is this? And then, if you're lucky, it will evaporate. And meanwhile, you continue your practice. You bring your mind back to what you're doing. Bring your mind back, bring your mind back, bring your mind back. Just keep doing that. Just bring your mind back. Okay? So even if you have this consuming thought, you're still not holding on to it. Maybe it's sitting there. Let it sit there like a piece of furniture. It's just like a piece of furniture. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to grasp it. You can just let it be. Okay? Okay. So now it's time to stop and thank you for your questions.